Welcome to Life on Earth. Welcome to Life on Earth. Welcome to Life on Earth.
Well, hello, you good people, and I do mean good people. Thank you for joining us. This is Life on Earth. Of course, it always has been, hasn't it? Life on Earth with Robert Nasir, Amy Nasir, and you, and we need you in the chat, especially for this conversation.
Yes.
This is a conversation that grew out of a few different posts online, social networks and forums, conversations with me and Amy, conversations with some of you.
My own personal experience.
Amy's own personal
Yes.
experience.
I don't think I may not be, I would not have been here today if it wasn't for this one book we're going to be talking about.
Yes. And we'll talk about a couple. So earlier today on the Thursday Collective, if you've missed it, Ayn Rand Center UK every Thursday doesn't just have the daily objective with a clever host or two. No, a collective of people. Thursday Collective today, Mark was on with Amanda and why is the third person escaping me? And the topic was Book of the Month. Nikos, of course, was playing the role of host. Book of the Month. This is great. Every Thursday Collective. Well, now this is going to be a regular feature. The last Thursday of the month, it's Books of the Month. What have you been reading? What do you recommend? They recommended some great books. If you didn't hear that episode already, give it a listen. But of course, it brought to mind, because I was already planning on discussing it, a book that Amy has said, and said just now again, was both formative and rescuing or
it helped me.
Helpful.
A lot. It helped. Yeah, it helped tremendously. I don't know if I could say that it saved my life as much as Atlas Shrugged did, but it definitely did. It did save my life.
Yes. And we'll have some questions for you in the chat. I don't know if all of these will be amenable to being a poll style question. Some of them will be open-ended, but I'm going to need to hear from you. I'm going to start with a post. This was a post that was put up on Facebook. Anybody who knows Felix Mueller, got to ask him if it's Mueller or Mueller. It's got a U and an E. I'm guessing Mueller, but German. I'm German, half German. You think I would have a better German accent. Point is, he posted a post of a screenshot of a post in a forum. And this is what some poor gal in a forum posted. And you let us know what you think of this. Original post. I, 27F. Well, of course, she's saying she's 27 years old and female. I hate how men value me because of my body count. And she goes on, so I have been with 58 different men, which I know is higher than average, but I wanted to have fun and enjoy new experiences, and it's my life, so I did. But I've settled down the last year, and I've really been trying to find someone special to settle down with and raise a family. All of my friends now are either married or in relationships, and whenever I meet a match with a man or meet one in real life, and they ask what my body count is.
It's such a weird question, by the way.
And I tell them, and they always make a disgusted face and unmatch or ghost me. I even met one guy I liked so much, and I thought was so sweet, who told me he wasn't interested in a woman with such high mileage and ended up dumping me. I cried my eyes out for days over that. I'm more than just the men I've slept with. I have a decent job, fun hobbies, and interests, and I'm still young. But I guess I'm just a hoe in most men's eyes. Ouch. Now, as you can imagine, this sparked a long chain of comments and other opinions from folks.
Yeah.
And I'll give my first answer real quick because this is the least important part of the conversation. But I said, well, there are multiple reasons for these reactions, both for the men in the post and the men in the many comments who were running the gamut from ew to, hey, that's cool. One or two of those reasons are not wholly unreasonable, even if they're not wholly rational or justifiable. Many of the reasons are not reasonable and some are downright contemptible. It runs the gamut.
Right.
So just a few of them, starting with the ones I found the more reasonable to the most loathsome. From concern about the psychological health, the seriousness of mind and or the depth of values of someone who finds it so easy to find worthy sex partners. 2, kind of automatic visceral reactions. A few people brought this up. Visceral reactions stemming from an active or overactive imagination or visualization. 2, jealousy, insecurity, fear of competition. We'll get back to that one. 2, attachment to tradition, outdated ideas of virtue, and fear of what others will think. 2, distrust of independence, hatred of women, hatred of pleasure, self-loathing. So it's an
heavy stuff.
It
here
got
today.
me thinking twice. My only point, if I have one at all, is that for this kind of phenomenon, the reaction is not usually as simple as, well, misogyny exists because tradition, or because religion, or because insecurity. It's got to be more than one thing for it to be that prevalent. And then I quipped, imagine this as a job posting. Positions available, no experience acceptable. In what other context is a complete lack of experience or expertise regarded as an asset? She has no idea what she's doing. That's hot.
Right. She has no idea what sex is or what her body can do. Oh, that's so exciting. No. But yeah, I mean, this strikes me as a question you would ask in high school. If anybody has ever experienced this, they did this a lot in the way back when. Are you a virgin?
Are you a virgin?
Are you a virgin?
Because that matters.
Like, yeah, so it just reminds me of that. But I mean, so what? She has 100, sexual partners.
But
it depends on how old she is, what kind of person that is, how responsible she's been otherwise.
Well, but 100 partners would imply that she's not taking it seriously.
Well,
do you think that she fell in love 100 times, or at least had enough of a friendly affinity with somebody 100 times?
Well, I know
to get between the sheets with them.
I know some women who consider themselves to be quote unquote boy crazy. And, so it wouldn't, I mean, and that's when they were teenagers. I mean, so what if they slept, with, had sexual relations with people when they were a teenager? Does that really count by the time they get married?
Right.
It just, it's really contextual. And I know people like to just jump on it and have an opinion.
Jump on it.
Jump on it.
Jump on it.
But
there's going to be bad puns. I've got to warn you about that.
Yeah, it's gonna be bad. But yeah, people, you need to really think about this carefully and not just put some laugh emoji on this.
So in the show notes, which are posted at facebook.com/Robert Nasir, tons of links to things we will talk about. Hopefully we'll get to them all. One of the, oh Lord. Yeah, one of the links is to the BBC. For folks who know anything about pornography, BBC, that's the British Broadcasting Corporation. The benefits of having many lovers. And then a whole article on consensual non-monogamy. They even call it CNM, consensual non-monogamy. We have friends on the social networks. I think we might have friends in real life who are non-monogamous, take their relationship seriously, but are not exclusive. So you're right. That is a thing that can happen.
Yeah. And then there are men who like to say they slept with 58 people, but they didn't.
I suppose that's a thing too.
They think of it as a score, which is very strange considering how they think of women who score, as it were. So
yeah. We talked before about nice guys finish last, which incidentally, as a description of a sex act, is probably exactly right. Nice guys do finish last, but nice guys don't get the girl. And this gets into this idea of men who hate women. Now, it's an overcharacterization, and we will get into the subtleties, but under men who hate women, we are including the manosphere. What do you mean the manosphere? The manosphere are just men trying to be more manly. They love women. They just know that women deserve a manly man. I get that. So let's say the half of the manosphere that is not so healthy in that regard, including the MGTOWs, men going their own way, men who've given up on women. They've given up on romance. We will have a few things to say about that. Or even worse, the incels, the involuntarily celibate.
Which is really a strange concept. I just learned today that incel meant involuntary or involuntarily celibate.
Yeah, you didn't know before what that stood for.
It's no. So I thought, do they expect things? Do they expect other things like jobs or money just to fall into their lap? Are they involuntarily, just hungry because they don't have the energy or the expertise to go out and find food?
I'm going to guess they're just as angry about that, but it's harder to personify and say, well, those pretty girls are to blame. They taunt me merely by existing. Yeah, I prefer to call them cage nose instead of incels. Yeah. I made up my own acronym for them. Cage nose, CAGENO, is just can't get none. Because that's really what's going on there, is they can't get romance. And they have no women in their life, and they are blaming everybody but themselves. In our very, 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 very first episode of Life on Earth, we talked about radical ownership. We talked about the idea of you take ownership of every situation, because whether you take the blame or not, you take ownership because that leaves you in the position to do something about it. And what I see in the incel community is the exact opposite of that. And to be honest, I see that with the MGTOWs as well, the men going their own way, even though they say they are building structures, societal structures that will foster men who can really be men in a world where women don't appreciate men.
So I want to just take a little note here, a little time, because one of the big reasons, so this came up in a Facebook chat, and simultaneously I was re-listening to one of my favorite books, the one that saved my life.
Yeah. You're getting into the meat here. I need to do one thing real quick.
All right.
Before we go any further, because we had the poll. The poll was great. And, it's kind of like we have the most rational audience in the world out there. And the results of the poll were, does body count matter? No. 63%, very high. Okay, a quarter of you said only if it's really high, but that's a little subjective. Are we talking about the 58 this poor girl or this happy girl has been through? Are we talking more, Michael Jordan kind of numbers? No, there's somebody much higher than Michael Jordan, who was a basketball star who slept with 1,000 women.
Dennis Rodman.
No, not Rodman. He might have too, but no, somebody older. Wilt Chamberlain, I think. Anyway, they're out there. So is it 58? Is it 1,000? Jennifer says Wilt. Yeah, exactly. Rodman might have too, but Wilt Chamberlain is famous for that. He was famous for saying, and with some degree of certainty and authority, that he had been with 1,000 women. And given who he was, I believe that. So my next question, after the great, and 9% of you said, yes, it does matter. Okay, we'll talk about that. And again, I gave some reasons why, reasonable reasons why it might matter, at least a little bit. But here's the next question for you. What's the right number? What's the magic number? What's the right number when you start a relationship, when you meet somebody, you decide to date, you decide if it's going to get serious? What is the magic number of people to have slept with? And it's funny because if you go to the links that I've posted, there are multiple stories out there. It turns out the correct number, the magic number of people to sleep with. How many lovers have you been with? How many is too many? The magic number is 12. Surveyed folks believed that having 12 sexual partners showed the person to be sexually adventurous, liberal, and transient. Too little a number was too conservative or sexually inexperienced. And more than the magic number 12, well, that was just too much. Respondents said that if someone was reaching, say, 19 or 20 partners, they probably had traits like being too selfish. Well, I don't know if that's even possible. Being difficult to please. Well, then why would the numbers be so high? Who would be interested? Or being eager to jump from partner to partner. Well, okay. Okay, but what's your number? What is the right number? And yeah, in the chat, we've got folks saying 11, 12, and oh, good. Daniel has posted, is the right number less than, more than, or zero? That's right, because you mentioned there are people who are And I found this in some of the stories I posted to. There are people who maintained their virginity until marriage. Now, when I was young, that was a thing. That was not uncommon, or at least it was not uncommon that people would try. I don't know if people still even try to do that anymore, but a few of the people in the stories did. Now, in looking into this and trying to get a little bit better answers than what we were getting in the forums, yes, I went back to a couple of books. The older one of the two is a book called Men Who Hate Women and
the women who love them. Why loving sometimes hurts, I think.
Yes.
And that's by Susan Forward. And that's the book that I read when I was 15, after I had a 9-month relationship with an abusive person. And it made me understand a lot, and it saved my life. And this was before Ayn Rand, but after I was an atheist, and I was still discovering a lot of things. But this book, listening to it on Audible recently, is just, wow. It is such a good book, and I recommend it for everybody, no matter what their circumstance. If you're a man or a woman, if you've ever run into this before or not, if you've ever run into what we call narcissists nowadays. There is that new book by Laura Bates simply called Men Who Hate Women. There's no tagline after that. And yeah, so it's out there, and you should definitely understand this a little bit, because especially if you're trying to understand why incels exist, why there are men who have that really militant and violent entitlement complex
and bitterness, just festering anger.
Yeah.
About the newer book, Laura Bates, and I'm stealing some notes here from NPR. Laura Bates spent a year immersed in the so-called Manosphere, a vast online world in which incels rub elbows with an assortment of other misogynists, from pickup artists with little respect for the concept of consent to the male separatists who call themselves men going their own way, but who can't seem to stop talking about women.
Yes.
The book she has extracted from this experience is Men Who Hate Women: From Incels to Pickup Artists, The Truth About Extreme Misogyny and How It Affects Us All. This is a Chamber of Horrors book.
Mm-hmm. It's a journalistic book, not psychology.
That's right. So the earlier book, believe me, if you think you are subject to any of these traits, whether you believe that you are the kind of man who does not treat women well, if you have that suspicion, or in particular, if you're the kind of women who think you fall for the kind of women who don't treat men well, men who don't actually like women, no matter how much they want to be with them, they want to sleep with them, they feel, oh, I love you, but they don't actually like women.
Yeah, they feel entitled to having had that experience, or having had that love from a woman, but that's not the same as love. That's codependency.
Yeah.
Yes.
Laura Bates writes, when incels do occasionally crop up in news reports or conversations, they're easily dismissed as a tiny fringe group of online weirdos. What you hear about them sounds so strange, so extreme, so hard to believe, so laughable even, that it is easy to shrug off. And that's a mistake. The incel community is the most violent corner of the so-called manosphere. It's a community devoted to violent hatred of women, a community that actively recruits members who might have very real problems and vulnerabilities, and tells them that women are the cause of all of their woes. A community in whose name over 100 people, mostly women, have been murdered or injured in the last 10 years. And it's a community you've probably never heard of. They're not hard to find. If you do a search for incel forum, go to where these people hang out, read the stuff now we know on the internet, sitting at a keyboard, people tend to project things that are more extreme than what you would get from them in person. But this stuff, this is the worst of the worst. And it doesn't take much looking around to find it. So I don't think Laura Bates here is exaggerating the data at all. We may reach different agreements about is male privilege an aspect of this? Is toxic masculinity an aspect of this? I don't think so. I think reading the earlier book gives you better answers to that.
Yes.
But the actual data she describes is very real and very chilling. And it crops up, it comes up in conversations like the ones that were had earlier this week. We got another poll. Is there a right number of past partners? And I'm going to plug in my no answer there. And then it reports that 78% of you agreed with me. So it's good to know that 78% of you are right. If you believe there is a right number of past partners, well, a few of you actually told us in the chat. Although it's interesting, the poll indicates it's lower. Most of the folks who put out a number, there were 11 or 12. ETR says 10 is the maximum. I would be interested to know, and I'll have to do more reading in the chat. Some of it I might have to catch up on later, why you think there's a maximum, why you think that is. Now, again, I gave a couple possible reasons why folks might say that. And the reasonable ones were things like concern about the psychological health, the seriousness of mind, and the depth of values of someone who finds it that easy to find worthy sex partners. I get it. I get it. It seems to imply not taking your values seriously, but to me, 10 is a strikingly low number. At the same time, there are a lot of people in the objectivist community, none who listen to this show, of course, I'm sure, but who were scandalized at the way Dagny Taggart jumped from one man to another in that book, Atlas Shrugged. I've read people who've said that was the worst thing about the book to them. Not the speeches were too long, not that it was too radical, but Dagny Taggart slept around.
Yeah, first with Francisco.
Yeah, that was like
Hank.
One guy. And then Hank
was,
is another, like two.
There was like another one, John.
And that's like three. We're already up to 3. Scandalous. Unbelievable. Actually, I think that might have been Ayn Rand's magic number, because how many men did Dominique Franken sleep with?
1,
2,
3.
3.
Oh my gosh, 3's the magic number.
Maybe I've been wrong all along, and 3 is the magic number. And there are stories, which I've only heard through the grapevine, that Ayn Rand did have a lover before she left Russia.
As she should.
There was somebody who played a role then in her defining other characters going forward in her life. And given Frank O'Connor and that other guy, the Voldemort, he who shall not be named, that would make 3 as well. So maybe 3 is, but if 3 is a magic number, I broke that odometer before I got married.
Yeah.
Yes. So anyway, we did have another poll there. Yes. And is there a right number? 73. Yeah. Final number went down to 67%. Say there is not a right number. 33% of you say, well, there isn't a right number. Well, now that we know 3 is
there a
Ayn
right
Rand's
number for you? And that's contextual.
Well, no, I always accept what Ayn Rand said.
Sex is good.
Sex is good. She did say that. When Leonard Peikoff asked Ayn Rand, well, what does philosophy have to say about sex? She said, it says that sex is good. Well, usually is.
So, I mean, is 12 the magic number if somebody slept with 12 people just last week?
That's a good point. That is a good point. If you run the number on this poor gal, 27 years old, 58 men, well, but depending on when she started and what her pattern was, it could have just been one guy every other month.
Right.
And she could have been dating and, kind of serious. Now, she did make in her note, made it sound like there was a very significant period of very casual sex, but she seems to imply that she's young, she's healthy. Presumably she took precautions and did things rationally.
Maybe it's been a couple of years since she's had sex,
Well, the last year, according to her, the last year, she slowed down and got more serious. And
there you go.
All right. So, incidentally, guess how many lovers the average British woman sleeps with in her entire lifetime?
28.
28. That is high.
Okay.
Too high.
All right. Too high. 18?
2018?
No.
18.
18.
18 is too high. at least if the poll is to believe, and you know how polls are, but I think this one was close because there's another one that cross-references it. The average British woman sleeps with 6.9 lovers. I'm guessing the 0.9 just couldn't get it done. 6.9 lovers during her entire lifetime, according to a recent survey. And then there's a link in the show notes too to another survey, which I don't have on paper in front of me, but that goes across all of Europe. And they found that England, remember these are British women, England was actually high. And in other parts of Europe, the numbers were even lower, which again surprises me.
They may be exaggerating or under, telling.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what do we have here?
So it kept coming up in the conversations, this idea that, nice guys finish last. And the reason why being nice fails, because it does, nice guys do finish last. The reason why being nice fails is because of what people mean by nice. The reason why nice fails when it does fail is that it doesn't include the most attractive trait in a man.
Knowing what you want.
Knowing what you want. The most attractive trait in a man is self-confidence.
Yes.
Self-direction, self-assertion. What Ayn Rand essentialized as strength. But, we're not just talking about physical strength.
Or efficacy.
Efficacy.
And strangely enough, that's actually what makes women attractive, knowing what she wants.
Well, there is that too.
There is that too.
I don't know. I've always said the most attractive trait in a woman is enthusiasm. But that might be pretty subjective. Oh, no, enthusiasm for romance.
Oh, for romance.
Hold on. Yeah, enthusiasm specifically in regard to romance, in regard to men, which incidentally goes against this idea that women should be demure and cloistered and totally inexperienced, because the most attractive thing in a woman is, now granted, it's enthusiasm for you, but it's of a piece with enthusiasm for everything to do with romance. So yes, the reason why being nice fails, guys, if you haven't quite cracked the code yet, the reason why being nice fails isn't because nice guys finish last. It's because when nice fails, it's because it doesn't include that most attractive trait: self-confidence, self-direction, self-assertion. Now, the kind of guys that Susan Forward is writing about, or that Laura Bates are writing about, these guys don't get that. They don't get that self-confidence, self-direction, self-assertion includes being nice, includes being a class act, it includes being a gentleman. And people have this idea: either you're an a-hole, to use the language from these posts, or you're a milquetoast, you're a pushover. And trust me, if women have to choose between a guy who's a jerk and a guy who's a complete pushover, the jerk is going to win 98% of the time. Make no mistake, that is a false alternative. The way out of the quandary is simple. You just don't be weak and don't be a jerk. Be strong, assertive, take charge, and be classy and gracious and nice. It works every time it is tried.
So, do you want to talk about the book by Susan Forward?
Yes. Yeah, another quote from the book. Incels use the metaphor of the red pill to describe the moment a man's blinkers fall away and he suddenly realizes he has been lied to his entire life. The world that he has been forced to believe works in his favor is actually hopelessly stacked against him. Everything from our government to the wider society is designed to promote women over men. The myth of male privilege is a myth.
So that's from the Laura Bates book.
That's from the Laura Bates book. Sorry, just reading that blows my mind, but I have met those people. I know that they're out there. The people who are convinced that they're not the hateful ones. The women are the hateful ones. And some of the guys, the Chads, the successful guys out there, the guys who can actually bed women, but especially the Stacys and the Bettys. There's a whole vocabulary. Look up incel vocabulary and you will find all of these explained. Now imagine for a second if you sitting in your underwear in your parents' basement on your computer, staring at a screen 9 hours a day, think of the world out there, the people who are actually living their lives as Chads and Stacys and Bettys and all of these categories of people, privileged people, the beautiful people who somehow have decided you don't deserve to have, I won't say romance, but sex in your life. These guys haven't the foggiest idea what romance is. Imagine spending hours and hours and hours on Reddit forums and 4chan and the dark web talking back and forth.
You're getting distracted by the chat.
Sorry, the chat is a little out of hand there. Sorry. But it explains a lot. And what's interesting is that you've got leaders, and a lot of them seem to be, associated with either the right or the fringe libertarians, the real wackos out there, who are part of this. I still remember Yaron Brook ended up at one of the one of the seminars down in Florida. I mean, he gave his talk. It was a great Yaron Brook talk, except there are other people on the roster talking about MGTOW, talking about how men are being oppressed, talking about how men can't be men anymore. And here's what you need to do to pull away from the current cultural context and be a manly man. You don't get phenomenon like Bronze Age pervert without this. And what needs to be understood is there is no kernel of truth here. One of my great projects is to find the kernel of truth in well-loved woo. So I will take a book like, Ryan Holiday's book, Ego is the Enemy. Obviously, the premise is wrong, but there are kernels of truth in there. We had some great takeaways. If you didn't see last week's show, give that a watch. I don't think there's anything good to come from somebody like Stefan Molyneux,
right,
and the MGTOW crowd and the people who have decided that they are oppressed for being men.
Now there is the I remember when like men's rights with regard to custody of their children came up,
yes.
And so there are some valid situations there that needed to be resolved. And I think hopefully, family court judges have gotten better with that, and that, of course, raise awareness for that, but don't drag in this kind of this misogynistic, basically, whenever I think of these guys who are like this, and they really fear and they don't understand women. And part of that is that they really fear and they don't understand themselves, and they don't know what they want.
Sorry.
And what you got, Robert?
It's just somebody posted the Nikos icon. Well, we need to take a moment here, because where's the super chat? The super chat is not happy, and it's because I didn't ask for it. So we've got a super chat from Jeff Bannister, who has been so good to ARC UK.
Thank you, Jeff.
And is in with 3 Canadian, very much appreciated. Let's have some more super chat. I want to hear from you with money, because it doesn't come to me. It supports the channel. The Ayn Rand Center UK, the most important single organization in the world today. Depending on how you judge such things, you got to get on board with it. But also, the point is that icon that you see, that humorous icon that Robin and Daniel have posted of Nikos Sotirakopoulos.
No, don't do that to Nikos.
Well, yeah, but if you don't see the little green star, it means you're not a member of the Ayn Rand Center UK YouTube channel. That's why you don't see those icons. Love that. It's hilarious. But what I was laughing about, of course.
Thank you so much, Johnny, for the $5.
And we have another super chat.
Yay.
How excellent. Thank you very much for that. Daniel says, pointing at Nikos Sotirakopoulos, this is what incels could be if they got out of the basement.
Yes.
Exactly. Right.
Absolutely.
That really is the solution.
Thank you so very much, Vigard.
Vigard is in for 200 kroner. Very generous. Thank you.
Objectivists going their own way.
Objectivists going their own way. That's right.
And Skrilu is 50. What is that?
I forget what SEK are. We'll look that up real quick.
Look that up. But thank you so
very
much,
much appreciated.
Guys. Thank you.
No, I don't know why I'm getting Krona for both of them. Oh, because Krona and Krona are different. Corona with an E, Corona with an A. We'll figure that out. Either way, thank you very much, gentlemen. Very much, or some of you maybe ladies. I have screen names here. Very much appreciated for that. And yes, I love the idea of objectivists going their own way, because unlike men going their own way, we ain't going. We're in the world. We're taking over this world. We are living our own best lives. Even if objectivism is not running the world 50 years from now, and I'm sitting in my rocking chair thinking, oh, we didn't win the battle. No, we won the battle today, because each one of us who are living these ideas, we're already winning. Which is why I can't resist getting into these conversations.
And thank you, Alex, for the £2.
Oh, excellent. And another £2. I see, you got to ask. I've got to remember to ask. You ask and you know,
You shall receive.
you shall receive. That's right. The Bible gives us that wisdom. Cast your bread upon the waters. Oh, we used that one last week. But yes, thank you very much for that.
Yeah, so we're talking about Laura Bates' book, Men Who Hate Women, and also Susan Forward's book from way back when. It's a classic. You all need to read it. It's still extremely relevant.
Men Who Hate Women and the Women Who Love Them.
Yes. Yeah.
Speaking of books,
yeah.
Since I promised we would touch on sex and romance and the positive side of sex and romance, I've got to cover a couple links in the show notes, which again are posted at facebook.com/Robert Nasir. Because I can find my list here so I can go through them. There's also another book called Men Who Hate Women. You notice I have behind me here The Girl Who Played with Fire by Stieg Larsson. The first book in that series was called, I know you're thinking, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. And yes, here in the United States, that is what it was called. But in Sweden, where it was originally published, it was given the title in Swedish, or is that in Swiss? Men Who Hate Women. And to the author's displeasure, when it came to the United States, they changed the title on it. Now, I think The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo worked out well for them, including an interesting movie with Daniel Craig and Mara Rooney in it. So that was cool. But yes, Men Who Hate Women isn't just 2 different books. It's 3 different books, depending on how you count them. I also put a link in the show notes to The Joy of Sex. And it's interesting to me, when I was growing up, which was way back in the 1900s, I guess there was pornography, but it was, magazines, Playboy, I guess, Penthouse, and more hardcore stuff, but that was hard to find. Nowadays with the internet, you don't really need to be taught the mechanics of sexuality. It's all out there. It's easy to find. But I still think that presentations that were available when I was a kid, when I was a kid, that was when it was good. And there was a book way back then called The Joy of Sex. And if any of you are young enough that you're still figuring all that out, or if any of you are old enough that you want to reminisce about what it was like when it was still healthy, positive, look up that book. And in fact, if you go to archive.org, I've put a link in the show notes. You can borrow a copy of it online and see it. A charming book, well done. There were some complaints at the time because they didn't cover homosexuality. They had a lot of information about sexuality and the mechanics of sex, but they did. So eventually another book came out called The Joy of Gay Sex. And I know we have some audience members for whom that one will be even more compelling. But that is a gift from me to you. That's all I'm going to say about that. I've mentioned sex positivity before, and I was a big fan of the sex positivity movement, although I think it went a little too far in that they got to the point where nothing was kinky anymore. Nothing went over the line, and I'm a firm believer some things should go over the line.
Or that there should be a line to go over.
There should be lines to go over. There should be a point at which you can say and really feel it, that, oh my gosh, this is kind of extreme. In fact, I'll talk more about that in a minute, but
okay.
You had something you wanted to say?
So,
yes.
So, okay. And, so apologies that this is kind of back and forth between 2 different books, Laura Bates's Men Who Hate Women and Susan Forward's Men Who Hate Women and the Women Who Love Them. And, we're trying to figure out, why is it these people, incels, for instance, at MGTOWs, think the way they think? Why is there such an attraction to it from a lot
what
of
the hell
men
happened?
who are sitting in their basements and they're not actually going out and meeting women? They're not actually trying to learn what, how to deal with women, how to have a relationship with women. They're not reading books. They're not trying to get help. As Laura Bates said, she said, like most of other anti-feminist groups out there, the MGTOW possesses the special quality of being a group supposedly exclusively devoted to men whose near total focus is women.
Yes, they're going their own way, but they spend all their time talking about women.
So, in trying to understand this and untangle all of this is really complicated. And you think to yourself, well, they're just evil nihilists out there, and there is certainly part of that. And, there are potential rapists out there even. There are potential abusers, misogynists who are in marriages who abuse their spouses, their wives.
It's another area where if you're not exposed to it, it seems very fringe, but look at the sexual assault statistics in the United States and look at the very narrow definitions. I know a lot of people will say, oh, what's defined as sexual assault these days? A lot of it wasn't really assault. So just look at the criminal rape statistics, and even those are shocking. It's so easy to think, well, that's not really a thing anymore, is it?
It is. But with that, and, looking at Laura Bates's, journalist examples of her going undercover into these online places and seeing all of this and exposing all of the nastiness, you've got to remember that, before the internet, this was talked about in bars and gentlemen's clubs, in frat houses. These sorts of concepts and ideas were out there. They were still out there. And sure, they didn't have any conglomeration of online support that you would see now, and you know exactly where to go to find it. They were more dispersed. But I think that, 20, 30, 40, especially 50 years ago, this type of thinking that that in order to be strong, a man needs to control his life. He needs to be the breadwinner. He needs to go out there, but he also needs to control his wife. He needs to control women. And that his own emotional security depends on that control of his women and of women, or his wife and his children, for instance. And you see that, and you see women who buy into that kind of warped sense of reality, that primacy of consciousness kind of thing, where you have narcissists and gaslighters and, people who, men who are rewriting history, and they're basically hacking away at the self-esteem of their loved ones, of their wives and their girlfriends, and women who buy into this. And but you'll learn more in Men Who Hate Women and the Women Who Love Them by Susan Forward about why this is. Laura Bates goes, for the journalistic documentation, everything that's going on right now. But if you really want to understand why this is happening and why this continues to happen, why men are extraordinarily afraid of women, why men still believe that women hold some kind of emotionally manipulative power over them, and why they should be the subject of control, and why they need to be controlled. So there's a lot of information in Susan Forward's book. It's really, really helpful. It's life-changing. It's life-saving. I know a lot of people who are coming out of the pandemic who, are living with their spouses and they're not having a very good time of it. I'll just say that. Or people who have decided to break up, because being, cooped up with their spouse or the boyfriend, has caused, the worst to come out of them, and, physical abuse to come out, and have thankfully left those situations. But there's a lot to learn. And this is not a subject that's really talked about in objectivism all that much, which is, domestic abuse, partner abuse, codependency, the lack of self-esteem. We talk about it in the Fountainhead. Howard Rourke says, you must learn to say the I before you can say I love you. Yes, we talk about it there, and we talk about the importance of self-esteem and reason and purpose. But these are the practical applications to that philosophy and to the psychology that is congruous with objectivism, or that's more reality based, not Freud's psychology, but the kind of cognitive behavioral therapy psychology that we talk about, that Gina Gorlin talks about, that Jean Maroney talks about, and other people in objectivism, Ed Locke, Ellen Kenner.
I was going to mention, I don't have a copy handy because we keep giving copies out. So I'm not even sure we have one in the house of Ellen Kenner and Ed Locke's book, The Selfish Path to Romance. But once you think you've got a handle on all of these failure modes in romance, the positive presentation can be found in that book, The Selfish Path to Romance. Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I'd like to carry on with my story real quick. So when I was 15, I was with a boyfriend, and one of the things he told me was, if you don't love me, I will kill myself. And he said it as seriously as he wasn't joking. He wasn't joking. He was serious about it, at least in the moment, at least psychologically, if not existentially. He never did kill himself, by the way, but no, that's the kind of emotional manipulation and psychological abuse, that was part of that with me, that he foisted on me. Thankfully, I was only with him for 9 months. It was when I was very young, and I really didn't exactly know what, gaslighting was, or narcissistic personality disorder was, or anything like that. But the thing that I really learned out of Men Who Hate Women and the Women Who Love Them by Susan Forward is that the key for me was that I learned that I'm not responsible for the emotions of anyone other than myself. I did not cause the emotions of others. So when somebody says to you, you make me feel like hell, it's all your fault. You made me, do whatever, or not be confident, or mess this up, or whatever. Or you make me feel, less masculine, or whatever it is. That's not, that is not necessarily valid, what they're saying. I'll just say that. They are responsible for their feelings. They're responsible for their evaluations and the thoughts behind those evaluations, behind those feelings. And emotions as such, even though abusers want to claim they are weapons against them, they're not weapons as such. However, somebody who is psychologically abusive can use emotional manipulation. They can gaslight, they can rewrite history, they can make you feel that you're completely off balance and you can't trust your own thinking anymore. They can have hot and cold temperatures, of like loving and hate-filled tempers that just all of a sudden can be triggered. And they can tell you emphatically that these sorts of things that they're going through are somehow your fault. And it can get to the point where that victim of psychological abuse can no longer be objective. And it can even get to the point of them buying into it and becoming co-conspirators in their own their own psychological abuse. So we don't talk about it enough, I don't think, but it is around us, and I have seen it recently, and it's all you can do with some people, with some women especially who are in that kind of situation with children who are married to an abuser, is give them the tools and hope that they'll use the tools and actually get help for themselves. Oftentimes, men who are abusive will not wake up someday and say, I'm an abuser and I need psychological help. A lot of these MGTOWs and a lot of these incels are not going to wake up tomorrow and say, I need to get psychological help and provide myself self-care because I need to reach more deeply into what I feel, my own experiences with my own mother and my own father, how my father might have been abusive, or how my mother suffocated me, or whatever it is that has brought them to this situation and brought them to become an abuser. So there you are. That's what I have to say. Thank you very much.
Yeah, again, the book it's an easy read, it's a quick read, it's a powerful read. And even if you are not in that kind of situation, there are insights in there that are extraordinarily valuable. I'm going to just go through the chapter list as we wrap up here. The book is in two parts. Part one, The Men Who Hate Women. Part two, The Women Who Love Them. And in part one, the chapter titles, The Most Romantic Man in the World, The End of the Honeymoon, How He Gains Control, Weapons, Where He Gains Control, the arenas, What Keeps Women Hooked, How Men Learn to Hate Women, How Women Learn to Love the Women Haters, and Madness for Two. I don't think any complex situation can be understood as, well, this one person is the bad guy without understanding why the woman finds it compelling to stay. May not be her fault, but until she takes ownership of the situation, she's not going to be able to do anything about it. It's a great book. And then part two also has 8 chapters as well. Again, valuable information, even for those who aren't finding themselves stuck in this kind of situation. So when there's a post online that says, well, nice guys finish last, and you've got to rule women with an iron hand, and I see that kind of false alternative. Or when there's a post that's somebody sharing a post from some other forum, this woman slept with 58 men, she can't figure out why nobody wants to get with her. It's a clarifying moment to realize that there are people out there who have the sexual maturity of a high school lout. And it's sad. It's sad, but also interesting to me. And again, I get psychological insights from these things. It makes me think, do I have ways in which I can improve in that regard, in regard to just dealing with people in general? Am I the man that I want to be? And it's a good question for all of us to ask ourselves, except for the ladies who should ask themselves, am I the woman that I want to be? Mm-hmm. Because nice guys do finish last if they're polite, but they also finish first. So thank you for joining us. I missed a few things in the chat, but I'll be going back and rereading it all. Thanks again for the contributions, the super chats. If you are not already a member, well, if you're a member of the YouTube, we talked about that. Click any of us, any of our names with the little star, or just click on Ayn Rand Center UK, and it will take you to where you can see the perks. You can see the great icons, some of the special shows that have been offered. We have recently simulcast some of the Zoom meetings, where even if you weren't on the Zoom call, you can watch it on YouTube. For example, the most recent discussion of the Ayn Rand Fiction Club. And we're doing The Fountainhead, my favorite book by Ayn Rand. That was a great session. Once again, Shoshana Milgram and Lisa Van Dam were on the call for that one. If you remember, you can go back and watch that. Just click See Perks at the top. But that's YouTube. If you're not already a member of the Ayn Rand Center UK, yes, I mean a member of the organization, there are 4 levels at which you can become a member. Go to aynrandcenter.co.uk. There's a link right in the chat there for you to click. But if you're listening to this later, yeah, join up, become a member, do like we did. You want to be part of this. And with that said, thank you for joining us for Life on Earth. We will see you on Clubhouse right after this. We're going to go to Clubhouse right after this. But thank you for joining us for Life on Earth. And that is a wrap.